The three things we want to talk about today, thank you. The three things we want to talk about today, the first one is going to be this. This is information we still get from what is mefurash, what was actually stated. That's the first thing we're going to deal with today. Information we get off the daf or from what was, remember, we are always going to talk synonymously, whether it was something that was written in the Gemara or any place else, or whether it was something somebody said. It makes no difference to us, whether it's the written word or the oral word. The first thing, this unit is going to be things that we learn about from things that are mefurash, the words were actually said. The second thing today, we're going to learn about diyukim. Diyukim are a piece of information that we gain from what was mefurash, but that piece of information that we're gaining is not mefurash. It's like the other side of the coin. You have the mefurash, you're going to understand that from what was said, but then you have, depending on how it was stated, you have things you're going to understand that were not mefurash. That's a diyuk in general. So the first thing is things we're going to learn from what's mefurash, then we're going to learn from things, an added piece of information from something that's eino mefurash. And then the third thing that we're going to do today is we're going to go to Tolados in chapter 7, which is the beginning of Hekeshim, which is drawing conclusions and consequences, which is the creative part of the mind, in the blue, in the map. That's where you take two statements and you put them together to produce a third new idea. It's called creative, something you didn't know. You say, now I know. I didn't know. Now I know. Well, how'd you know you didn't know? Because, well, if that's true, and that's true, so then this has to be true. Right. So those are going to be the three things we're going to do today. First two more quickly, because we're really behind, and when we get to Hekeshim, put more energy, because that's really a major piece of the logic of our thinking and the Gemara's thinking. So, okay, here you have in front of you the Ramchal gives us 6 different positions between the positioning of a couple, a pair, 2 sentences together. The 3 that we are most interested in is, and you can see, by the way, on the scale on the bottom, it goes from things that are most similar to totally different. What does most similar mean? In the subject or the thing you want to talk about and the information you want to talk about them, there's a lot of similarity. That's the right side. For me, it's the right side, the similars, the domim. 2 statements that domim, which can even mean that you're saying the exact same, these 2 sentences are saying the exact same thing, just in different words or in different order, all the way to the end, the other side of the scale, where you have 2 things that they don't want to talk about the same thing, and their pieces of information are totally different. One is talking about Mack trucks and diesel fuel, and the other one is talking about little chicks and feathers. No. Be the beginning of a sugya. Many times, right? Because it's not connected to what came before. Or it's just a new topic. That was just okay. In there, we talked already about similars and alternatives. The one we really want to spend a little bit more of the further time on is this one, which is opposites and contradictions, which is we're going to see in the Gemara when we're going to get involved with steers and kashas. The first opinion said something, the second opinion says, you're wrong, buddy. And because now we're interested in how the second statement is telling the first statement, you're wrong, buddy. So now, I'm going to introduce you, some of you may know it already. This is one of my favorite things. May I ask you, David, to give it out? This is called the square of opposition. The square of opposition is something from classic logic, but classic logic means that's the way the mind works. So we see it all the time. It will be a useful tool for us in understanding and being able to get a clear picture of what's going on in the Gemara. There you have it. I have it already. Okay? Square of opposition. The square of opposition. We're going to have 4 different types of statements. Thank you. You can see it goes like this. A, E, I, O. Makes sense for those of us who are English speaking. A, E, I, O. We are going to use them. You remember when we spoke about subjects, we had any subject, we broke all sentences down in the world to 3 types. When we look at them, when our aspect of demarcation, our division is by the subject, that thing you want to talk about. Every sentence has to be something you want to talk about. We'll call it the thing, for lack of a better word, and the information you'll say about it. And there, Hagav, we said there's all different types of things you can talk about, whether they are totally abstract to totally solid, and many things in between. That's another conversation. And there's tons of things you can say about them. You can say about the whole of it, the whole of it, the part of it, the subject of it, a mischaber to an associated competence, all different kinds of things. Things and the information you'll say about them. They're the new terms we're using instead of subject and predicate. Subject is what you want to talk about. Call that the thing. Predicate, what you want to say about it. That info. Now, the division is 3 types of subjects. Any and every sentence that was ever stated is either going to be, the subject is going to be a kolel, a generality, which means many specifics in that general thing you're talking about. Baseball players, or I don't know. B'nai Torah. You say you start a sentence with B'nai Torah. The thing you're talking about is a kolel. It's a subject kolel. That's one. You can have a specific. Yushalayim. You want to say something about Yushalayim? Specifically Yushalayim. Yushalayim is Yirah Kodesh. That, your subject, the thing you want to talk about, is a specific. And then you have the third possibility of the thing you want to talk about is a partial subject. It's talking about some of that group. Okay? Now, with that as a background, just getting our heads together. So we're going to say an A statement is where you're going to say your subject is going to be a general subject, and your statement is affirming some information about that whole general group. It's called a kolo makayim, or an all are, or all yes. A E statement will be the opposite. You'll see that that word is, it says opposites. It is going to be a kolel sholel, which means you can say all or not. No, nobody here would ever make a mistake in Gemara. I don't know, whatever. Talking about a kolel, you're going to say none of them. And then over here, you're going to have some yes and some no. In this, normally you can the swing man is the specific. You have to decide when you're going to see a specific statement, is it really saying an all, and it just happens to be that that group has just one unit in that group, Yerushalayim, is Yirah Kodesh. Or you're saying, when you say Yerushalayim, you're saying some cities are Arei Kodesh, some cities are holy cities. Jerusalem happens to be one of them. You're saying not all are, you're saying some. That's a swing man, you have to decide. But let's go to the alls or the sums. Now, if you have 2 statements, one an A statement and one an E statement, and it happens to be that they have the same subject, the same thing they want to talk about, and they have the same information about them. Yerushalayim is Yirah Kodesh. Let's say put it here, talk about the specific. And then you'll say Yerushalayim is not Yirah Kodesh. Same thing, same subject, same thing you want to say about it, which is Yirah Kodesh, and one is affirming Yirah Kodesh in Yerushalayim, and one is denying Yirah Kodesh in Yerushalayim. Those are called opposite statements, what we would call diametrically opposite. Right? L'katza, the Ramchal's lashon is mikatza l'katza. And you'll see it many times as steers. This is true, that's not true. Kefel, let's say our mission in the beginning of a mafkid, you'll tell me that Kefel, the Baal can makne Kefel, that type of davar shelo ba'olam, the Baal can makne. We'll come and say, no, Kefel, you cannot be makne. Or that davar shelo ba'olam, no, not. Diametrically opposed statements. Okay. Yet you also have kashas and steeras where they won't be diametrically opposed, mekatza lakatza. They will be on the diagonals. What is that? You'll say here, let's say, you take an all no, and you put it against a one yes. Same subject, same predicate. You'll tell me, Ein adam makna davar shalo bala olam. A person is this is our working example. People, you can, all davar shalo olams, the Baal cannot makna. So we have our subject is a generalization, and he is denying the ability to be makna, the Baal's ability to makna in that whole group of things of dvarim shelo bala olam. Okay? That was Rabbi Bar Kama's kasha. He asked that kasha on the Mishnah, according to Rashi, who said, kefil, a specific, is one thing that it is a davar shelo ba'olam, and you can makna it. So those are, when you'll have two statements, one will be a generalization, and the other one will be a specific. Same subject, same predicate, but one going yes, all yes, one going, this is all no, one going one yes, or vice versa, some saying all yes and saying one no. If we said, all Jews are general subject, and we are affirming in each one of them, that's what all means, that they have a chelik in olam haba, and someone says, hey, that's not true. Yerovam ben Navat, he didn't have a chelik in olam haba. I show you one guy that didn't. Now what's interesting here is they may be agreeing statistically on 99.9% of the cases. So it's not diametrically opposed here where it was like a total blanket. But here, what you have is, in statements, it's a total, the Ramchal's word, hachasha. It's a total negation. You know, the kid comes in and says, Daddy, you said everybody's going to get ice cream. I didn't get ice cream. So the kid, I mean, nice kids, our kids don't say this to us. Daddy, you lied, you know, or you said we're all, and we didn't do it, or I didn't do it, and I didn't get, and things like that. Normal, everyday kinds of things we use this. What's the contradiction? He's saying, you said all, yes, and I didn't, or either this way, this way. So what he's saying is, maybe everybody else got, but I didn't get, so what you said was not true. That's the square of opposition. Now, for it to really be opposite, this I didn't write down, so you can write on these sheets, these are for you. For them to be true, there's a certain conditions for things to be really opposites. We said they have to have same subject, same predicate, right? One's going to be in the denial and one's going to be the affirmative. They have to be in the same place, same time. If you're talking about two different time spans, time Beis HaMikdash, after Beis HaMikdash, that's not a real contradiction. They have to be in the same time, the same place, the same aspect, and the same usage of language. 4 things. I didn't write it down. You got to write it down. It's worth it. Because this is also how you're going to answer you're going to remove all the steerers. You're going to remove it in one of these fields. Because this is what it has to be. Let's give an example. We say, not marry 2 sisters. All Jews cannot marry 2 sisters. I tell you, Yaakov Avinu married 2 sisters. It's called a misnad, contradictory statements. It's kasha. Hey, you told me all Jews, no Jewish men cannot marry, all Jewish men cannot marry sisters. I have one guy who did. Okay, so now, classic terutzim are going to be, one was before Matan Torah, this one was Moshe, he was before Matan Torah, and this was after Matan Torah. What is that? You said, no, they're not contradictory. There's the teretz. They're not contradictory. He's talking about 2 different time spaces. You thought they were like this? No. They miss each other because it's 2 different times. That's one of the famous terutzim. And the other famous teretz is, in Eretz Yisrael, not in Eretz Yisrael. Same thing. We said, no, they're not contradictory because they're talking about 2 different places. The Ramchal, let me just go back for a second, a side piece, which is very worthwhile to hear. The Ramchal, when he gives us all this stuff, one of the major things he doesn't talk about to the end is sequencing, priority. Like, what is a best chiluk? What is, like, if I gave you a list? Well, in the end, I see two different terutzim. I'm going to say this one's stronger. Well, this one's dafka. This one's more dochek. This one is more of an okimta. Terms that we'll learn about. But there's also priority in the nature of chilukim. Logical priorities, teva priorities. We'll get into that. So here, when he says to you that time is his first rule when you want to have a real contradiction, it has to be in the same time, and then he says same place. He's telling you that time is more of a, and he uses that, I know because he uses it in other places too, that time is going to be your primary mode. You first want to say, no, it's two different times. Two different times. Then you can't say two different times, okay, two different places. Okay, you can say two different places, you say two different aspects. This is talking about in terms of maybe they were sisters from father and mother, and this was just talking about sisters from father. Is that true there? No. But okay. Whatever it is, you'll have gradations. Okay? This is something that, again, we have to go on and do other things. But if you come on Friday, we'll do more exercises on this and see it inside the Gemara. We'll come back to it. But not bad. Time, place, aspect, and same usage of language. In other words, the Ramchal brings an example where we use the word tokeya. The word tokeya can either mean to blow a shofar, or it can mean to take a hammer and smack the nail on the head. So we'll have two different dinim where we'll say tokeya. Some places say it's a chachma, some places you'll say it's chayiv. He says, no, you would think that that's a contradiction. The answer is, no, you don't understand. That's same word, but two different meanings. So for there to be a real stira or a misnaged, it has to be same time, same place, same bechina. If I say, we've talked about this before, if I say, well, he's a great guy, and the other person says, you kidding? He's a terrible guy. Great and terrible, you'll say, are that's not great. He's not great. Good. So then we'll say, that's not a stira. It's not a kash. We're talking about two different bechinas. You're talking about in terms of his midos, and I'm talking about it in terms of his davening, limud Torah, something. Not a stira. Two different bechinas. 1 second. Yes. Yes.
And the languages of the two pieces, the mamarim, are slightly different. We still prefer to use time as a way to answer that kind of
No. That's just a no. No. Certain things, obviously, if it's going to be different languages, you're going to have to come on to different languages.
What's the point of the...
Let's say you have a choice between time, place, and aspect.
So language is...
No, language is very specific. That is going to be, even though that's on the list, it's going to be a specific one. Right. Time seems to be a more primary... in the sequencing of priorities of your kind of chilukim, time seems to be at the top. We see it again in the later. That also could be true. That's saying, although he doesn't mention it here, but you're right when we do okimtas, which is the same thing. When you're talking about different aspects, you're basically going to make an okimta. You're going to say that was spoken about specifically in these terms or that aspect. And one other thing, I say, well, that's talking about davening, this talks about midas, it's talking about two different shitas. As we know, many times that's the way, it's more of a bottom way. People, we don't really want to give a teretz like that. That would be more dochek to say, no, that was Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Meir, whatever. But you can do it. That's a way, it's also a way to do it. That's really in different aspects. The aspects being authorship. Okay? Any questions about that? Good. Now, next thing we need to do is go back to Diyukim a little bit. Diyukim, we said, is going to be a piece of information you're going to gain from a given sentence, but it's eino mefurash. By the way that it was stated, you say, I know something else. A diyuk is going to see, I'll tell it to you now before I even give you the papers, is a strange thing. There's two types of diyukim. There's mukhrach diyukim and bilti mukhrach diyukim. Most diyukim we make are bilti mukhrach. That needs a little bit of an explanation. Because it is totally natural for the mind to make a diyuk. When you say, like the sign, the new signs that I put up, I said, I don't know if you saw it, sign said, how did Rabbi Akiva do it? I don't know if you saw that sign. So the answer was, he had a method. So I was, okay, we did that yesterday, which is, if you read the English translation, in the Hakdama, they talk about that. Rabbi Akiva, and it's a Gemara in Gittin, and Rashi in the Gemara Gittin, it says that Rabbi Akiva had a method. Ramchal uses a method. In the Hakdama, the Ramchal, and Der Funos, he explains more generally that concept of having a method. Okay, that's just a side point. So I wrote the statement, I said, listen, it says, he had a method. So I was wondering today, I was putting up the sign on the door, I said, wow, someone could say to me, do you mean to say the other Chachamim besides Rabbi Akiva, Bilti Mukhrach Diyuk, didn't have a method? Right? That's the Diyuk. You'll say, what do you mean? You specified he had a method. He had it, mashma, they didn't. So now that we know, we see it's Bilti Mukhrach. It's the mind does it naturally. We have to make this distinction. For the mind to hear that added piece of information and something you made specific, a miut, that's natural. And it's even mukhrach for the mind to do it. However, in logic, it is not mukhrach. Because as we know, examples, I'll say to you, no, of course all the Chacham had a method. But Rabbi Akiva, the Chiddush was that he started at 40, and with that method he went zip. So it's tricky in the sense that it's mukhrach for the mind to do it. It's so natural, and the Bible says, that's mukhrach. It's not. It's not mukhrach there, meaning it's logically forced, and it has to be. There are other diukim that are like that. Okay? That's the introduction, basically, diukim. A piece of information that we gain from something that's not stated. Up till now, we have dealt with what there is to be understood from what was actually stated. Inferences are what we understand from the statement, even though it is not stated. See there, I made an afal pi statement for us who still always want to work on our ma'amarim. That because you would think if it wasn't stated, it's not there. It's there, afal pi, it's not stated. Even though it's natural for the mind to make the yukim, most of the time, the inference is not mukhrach. I'm going to make a general statement which I think is true. That the diukim, all the diukim the Gemara makes are built in mukhrach. The Gemara does not make a mukhrach diuk. Why? You'll tell me, come on, that's nuts. What do you mean? Yes, why? Because a mukhrach diuk, which we're not going to deal so much with today, but a mukhrach diuk is saying the exact same thing you've already said, just in a different form. Let me give you an example. If I said all Jews have a chelek in olam haba, I would make it like this if I wanted to make a picture out of it. I would say all Jews, they would be the inner circle, that general subject, have a portion in the world to come. So that's the statement. A mukhrach diuk is that if this person or that group doesn't have a portion of the world to come, meaning they're outside this pale, then they can't be Jews. That's a mukhrach diuk. So all the chachamim, like all intelligent people, not necessarily ourselves, but all intelligent, for mukhrach diukim are obvious. So the Gemara is not going to state something that's mukhrach, because when you said it, they understood already all the variations, the different forms of it. So they're going to say, hey, you misunderstood what I said. You didn't know the mukhrach diuk. That was, So therefore, I think we can say that all the diukim in the Gemara are bilti mukhrach. That's why many times we accept them straight, but many times either they're argued with or they need a raya. It's not like because it doesn't have to be that way. It's true. I understand your mind made that. But it has to be that the person who said the statement, he wanted you to make that diuk. That's what he intended for you to understand, that added piece of information. So you need a raya for it for many times, which is just a proof in and of itself that it's not mukhrach. If it was mukhrach, you don't need a proof for it. Good? So let's just work in here a little bit. So it goes to mukhrach inferences. We're not going to do those now. However, if you look on your map, in inferences you have this shaded area. I don't know if any of you have that, or I printed out some more of these so they're there. But basically, so you can do this yourselves. The mukhrach dikum, if you take your square of opposition, it works very well. Without saying what they are, I actually have a sheet. I'll just maybe hand you the sheet next time. A kolel mikayim statement, an all are, has two mukhrach diukim. One was the one that we already did. A kolel sholel, an e statement, has one mukhrach diuk. If you say all these are not that, so the mukhrach diuk is all those are not this. You're just reversing the subject and predicate between the two statements, because remember, a diuk is also a new statement. So it works well with the coupling of statements we talked about. You have your statement, and then you have the diuk. So it ends up being two statements. And these two down on the bottom, the sum statements, each have three mukhrach diukim. So the way I remember it is 2133. 2133. What they are, I don't want to do right now. It's important to do, not now. When is it used in the Gemaras? When you are brought, primarily I would say, when you're brought a source from a Mishnah or a Brisa, and you want to bring it either as a raya or as a stira to what you want to talk about. Many forms, the form to be able to align that the same subjects and same predicates, to be able to have a clear opposite statement or to have a misnaged statement, you have to change the form of that Mishnah a little bit. It's not stated in the user form you exactly want it right now. So that you have the mukhrach diyum puts it in the form where the subject is the subject that you're talking about and the predicate is the predicate you're talking about. You have the ability to reformat that Mishnah, that Brisa, using mukhrach diyukim. Okay? Hopefully we will get an example or two of that so you'll see it. Okay, let's go to this sheet. Bilti mukhrach diyukim. We just have a few examples. Non-mukhrach inferences. Zos achaya asher tochelu. So obviously, and I say it's obvious because it's natural for the mind to do it, when the classic form of diuk is going to be made on a miyut. When you say zos hachaya asher tochelu, or he had a method, so your inference is, these are the animals that you can eat, mashma that there are animals that you can't eat. That added piece of information is the bilti mukhrach diuk of this statement. Ve'ela divrei David achronim. These were the last words of David HaMelech. Since you had the word, you didn't have to have the word achronim. You could just say, these are the words of David. The fact that you made a miyut, you told me that they are the last words of David, I understand that they were first words of David. It's not mukhrach, because you're going to say, no, I just said that they were the achronim because there were no other words. He said this and he died. No other words. That's the only thing he ever said. He didn't die or whatever. Okay. Down. Rav Yehuda Omer, Hatzat Sipor Lamigdal V'Tzvi Labayis Chayav. Rabbi Yehuda said that Hatzat Sipor Lamigdal, Miyut. Tzvi Labayis, Miyut. So the Gemara will medayik, Labayis with the Mechayev, will be boring, low. Because you didn't have to tell me that. The Baal HaMamer could have said Hatzad Tzipor, Hatzad Tzvi. The fact that he gave something specific to these places means when you trap them or hunt them or whatever into these places, that's where it's chayiv. The diuk is going to be, must be again, it's not mukhrach, but I will assume that that's what he wanted to tell me, unless either proved otherwise or, because why did he say it like that? That's what my mind thinks, and my mind thinks naturally that, and my mind's right, but it's not mukhrach. Okay, go on the other side of the page. We have from our Gemara on Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, Ema Seifa. This is in the discussion they want to bring a Rebbe Yochanan says, our Mishnah says, Shilein v'lo ratzah l'shava, the Shomer, when he pays and he doesn't want to take a Shavua, so then he is also, then he gets the kefil. The Baal is machna to the Shomer, the kefil. Just doing this for people with me, not, so then bear with me. So Rabbi Yochanan wants to say, oh, it doesn't lo shileim mamish. We don't have that here. Doesn't mean literally he has to pay. Even if he just says, I will pay you. Don't worry. I will reimburse your capital loss. I will reimburse you. Don't worry. So then that's enough, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that the Baal will already makne the kefil to the shomer. He says, okay, good. It's yours already. So when we find the thief and the knas comes, it goes to the shomer. Okay? There's a machlokis, there's a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, and then this is going to be a raya. It says, Ema Seifa. We want to learn from the Seifa of the Mishnah for Rabbi Yochanan that just stepping forth and saying, I will cover that loss for you, I will pay you is good. Ema Seifa. Nishba v'lo ratzah l'shalem. The Seifa says, Nishba, he took the other possibility, he took a shvu and doesn't want to pay. So the Gemara says, Taima, it has a din. It doesn't fill. The din is that the shomer does not get the kefil. The Gemara doesn't say it. We have to fill in the information about that case. The case is, our noseh, what we want to talk about, that thing is, Nishba v'lo ratzah l'shalem. The Gemara comes into we know what the din is, the information is not mekabel the kefil. So the Gemara says, Taima de lo ratzah. See, it said Nishba, he took a shvuah, and he didn't want to pay. So the Gemara says, I'll make a diuk. You told me that. Why do you have to tell me that? Why did added words? You should have just told me if he takes a shavua, he's not going to get the kefil. But you didn't say that. The Mishnah spoke too many words. It came to for me to medayek. You took a shavua and you didn't want to pay. So I'll tell you the reason that he doesn't get the kefil is because he didn't want to pay. So the diuk is haratza, if he the other side, afal bishalo shilei. Okay, diuk. Last one. Im rov Yisrael mevarech. That's the statement, I think it's in Brachos, Yitzayin or something. If it's the majority of Jews, you make a bracha. So the diuk is, if you said majority makes a bracha, so then din will be mechsa mechsa, 50-50, eino mevarech. Diuk. Now, this is an example to show you, I don't know if it printed out right. My computer went a little haywire here. Bidin hu dafilo mechsa mechsa nami mevarech. Va'aide de, probably is Tana, Reisha, Rav Kusim, Tana Sefer, Rov Yisroel. This is the example to show you that a bilti mukhrach diak is just that. It's not necessarily true. Your mind's going to do it naturally, but doesn't have to be right. What's this? The original statement said, if there are a majority of Jews, you're mavarech. The diuk is, the reason you were mavarech is there was a majority. Diuk is, if there's not a majority, but only 50-50, you're not. That the majority, what was gorem, the din, the information about it. Comes along the Gemara, says, no, that's not true. Really, even if it's 50-50, you also mevarech. And the fact that it said majority is because of stylistically from the other part of the Mishnah. Clear example that the diuk that your mind is naturally doing is not mukhrach. Okay? Any questions? All right, now we've done all that. We get to really what we really wanted to do today. This is the beginning of chapter 7, which is Hekashim. Hekashim, as I explained to you, we are now moving forward. I'm going to give out sheets here. I photocopied the Ramchal, these 2 pages. First, that you should be able to have it to carry around if you don't have it. The other also, this is primary stuff. So I actually wanted to read it with you inside. Usually I don't like doing that, not because I don't enjoy reading the words of Ramchal, because it slows us down. But this is worth to take the time. And there are certain things I want to point out to you as we read it. So everybody get it? It's yours. I want you to highlight it. I want you to underline it. That's what I'm giving it to you. So just wait till everybody has it. Okay. Any questions, please ask. Huledes hatolados. This is, it's the giving birth or the conclusions, the consequences of statements. When you put two together, let's say a zachar and a nekeva. No, not, don't really mean like that. Though, by the way, if we wanted a hypertext into a more Kabbalistic mode of things like that, it is probably true, I'm sure many people tell me that of course it is true, that the way our minds are structured in terms of our logical thinking is not just limited to our minds. That is the full smorgasbord of everything Hashem created in the Bria, in this Bria. It all goes together. We're in the logic of the thinking, but that you have a phrase of Holedes Toladot, and that is going to be an aspect of taking a major premise and a minor premise and putting to result with a new baby is also part of that's what's happening in our mind. But what's happening in our mind is very much in tune and in step with the Bria B'chalal. Up till now, the Ramchal tells us, he explained to us what we have in our map, all in these red parts, this whole red thing, which was Havana, the aspect of the mind and the foundations of the whole Shachli Ratari, which means understanding. We have understood in the first column all the way to my right, the meaning of statements, what do you get from what's mefurash from the statements. The next one, the middle column, is what you get when you get two statements together. We're talking about the square of opposition, and kashas, terutzes, and rayas, all will line up there. How do you align these two? How they're aligned. That's a piece of information that you also get from the general understanding. And from the third one will be diyukim. You're learning it from the statement. It just is not explicit in the statement. But you're still learning that from the statement. It's a piece of information from the statement. Now we go to the second part of the foundations of the mind, called the activities of the mind, which is insight. By the way, and these are the three things the mind does. And if you even read modern psychologies or psychiatries or even in the neuroscience they're doing it, this is what they talk about. They talk about the comprehension, insight, creativity, and decision-making. And this is, okay. There's a lot to be said about that conversation. That's for Friday, or call me up, or stay later or something. A lot to talk about. Okay. Teva Hizbonus. The Ramchal wants to explain to us what we do naturally. All these things, to varying degrees, we do naturally. These are the foundations. However, in there, the one place he says it's the nature of reflection, it's the nature of deeper thinking, is this. Teva Hizbonus notein. Shekasher yamer nasu, when you say a piece of information, echad, or unit of information, b'nosa echad, in a certain subject, about a certain thing, kol mashia nichlal or mischarber be'emes banasu ahu, anything that really, be'emes, that's really a prat in that klal of the piece of information, or associated with that piece of information, a mischaber, a technical term. It's associated with it. Here we're speaking broadly, but still technical terms. In that piece of information, Yalmer bo to'anoseh. Third line, at the comma, v'chein. So first we talked about the unit of information, or the nasu. What we used to call the predicate.
This is the information.
What?
Information.
Yes, the information. V'chein, kol ma shenichlal ba'oto anoseh, what's included, it's nichlal in the subject, or that thing you wanted to talk about, Obviously, it has to be talking about something that's a generalization. Could be a partial generalization or a total generalization, but it's going to be a generalization if you have things that are nechlalim, that are specific in it. Yamer oto hanasu. The alpi ashorish hazeh kedesh nishma mamar min amarim. According to that shoresh, one shoresh, and our picture is we're going to do it in a second. Really talks about the shoresh. When we nishba mamar min amarim, when you take almost any statement, what can come out of that is yilvaldu lo mimeno mamim harbe. Out of any given statement, you can have many offshoots, many consequences, many conclusions. Kulam, all of them, nimshachim, they're nimshach be'emes min amar maru shishamanu v'nichlalim bo. They are nimshach from it, and they are a consequence of it, and they are nichlal, they are included in it. Kiderech, just like, lashon of a dimyon, kiderech shenichlalim apratim b'klalim, just like specifics are in a general. So here, the picture is pretty self-explanatory. If we had a statement, and we wanted to say, Kol Yisroel, Yesh Lam Chelek La'olam Haba. So according to the first part of the Sharesh, anything that you will tell me is included in this. So we're saying all Jews, the information we're giving to you about them is have Chelek La'olam Haba. So anything you can tell me that's a prat in the klal of Olam Haba will also be said about all Jews. Or alternatively, anything that you'll tell me that will be associated with Olam Haba, like eternity, will also be said in all Jews. So if you said like A is B, all Yisrael have a chelik in Olam Haba, any B1, B2, B3 that you will come down to in the B will also be said about A. All Yisrael have a chelik in Olam Haba. Having a chelik in Olam Haba means you have eternity. Immortal, call it eternity. B1, eternity. So now I can say, call Yisrael, have eternity. Or the other side was, when we're looking, the way I always thought about it was like, where's your move going to be? Is your move going to be from your original statement? Is your, I don't know, call it a move, is it going to be in the information, or is it going to be in the thing you want to talk about, in the subject? So here we just had it was in the information. They have a chelik in Olam Haba. All Jews have a chelik in Olam Haba. Chelik in Olam Haba means eternity. So now I know that any Jew that had Olam Haba, he also has eternity. All Jews have eternity. Or conversely, you can make it in the subject, which is that, and this one, by the way, is the most powerful hekesh, the most powerful system of creativity that you'll find. I'll show you, the Ramchal will say it in a second. And therefore, if you could ever bring a raya, which is one of the reasons we use this, if you ever want to bring a raya or prove something from a hekesh, your strongest one will be when you'll tell me a subject, a general subject, like Kol Yisrael, and then you'll tell me that this A1 or A2 or A3, whatever, is a prat, a subgroup, a smaller group in this bigger group. So then, of course, they had the information that the big group had. The reason that that's the most powerful is because when you told me Kol Yisroel, it already had in it, embedded in it. It was built from all the pratim that make up Am Yisroel. So you really, in the first sentence, you already told it to me. Okay? So that's the model. Let's just read a little bit. Derech Mashal. Shamano sha'osa av malacha b'Shabbos chayiv skila. We heard, interesting usage of word. We know in general, like we know that, we accept that a person who does an av malacha on Shabbos, he's chayiv skila. Hine neda. From this we know, shekol ma shu av malacha, any specific that is an av malacha, yesh bo inyan will have the same information about it of a chayiv skila. When I told you the general, so I understood that any specific that's in there. Me'ata kol ma'isa sheneda sheheyot av malacha. Any specific that now I know is an av malacha, and that's a new piece of information. that you're going to have to tell me. Well, is this an av malacha? Is borer an av malacha? Is lash an av malacha? Maybe it is. Oh, borer is an av malacha. Neda vadai. Those two words in the Ramchal, you will see as we go on, are very dafka. You will know definitely. It's the most powerful one he says lashon like that. Neda vadai. You will know without a doubt. Vadai. Not suffix, not maybe, not probability, not you're leaning to say it. It's definite. Sheish bo chiyuv skila. V'nolid mizeh. And now that anyone that we knew, like let's say, borer, we now know it's an amalacha. So we now know definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, that it is chiyuv skila. V'nolid mizeh. And comes out of this our new creative thing, something we didn't know. Sha'kosa b'shabbos chayv skila, shalash chayv skila. That writing, now that we know that it's an amalacha, we now know something new about it we didn't know before. That's chayv skila. Because it's a prat in the klal of kol malachas. I now know that lash is chayv skila. Didn't know that before. I wasn't sure. It's a prat in that klal. V'chein kulam, kol eilin nechalalim banosa b'amamar, hayechad hainu osa av malacha. Because this one, they are all there initially. Essentially, they're nechlalim, they're embedded there. Okay? That's where our move, as it were, was in the nosa, in the thing we wanted to talk about. We talked about a general nosa, and then we came more to specifics. V'chein, similarly, ilu shamata mamar, if you had a mamar, ha'izmil, shalmila, the mila knife, hu mukse, hine kol ma shivada lanu heyot mitchaber lanosa shel zeh, shel mukse. Anything that I will know is associated, let's leave the word associated, or is a piece of information about muksa. Another piece of information about that piece of information. So anything I know about muksa, tadin bli safek. It's not neda vadai. The Ramchal took us down a notch. When we were talking about these hekesh moftis and the move was in from the general subject to a prat in that klal, that was neda vadai. When we were over here about the information that muksa, and then I told you something about muksa, so it's not neda vadai, it's just bli safek. Because it was not embedded, it's not the same way that here, let's say we said Kol Yisrael, and we had Ruvain. Ruvain was already there in Kol Yisrael. That's what makes up Kol Yisrael. If you want to say, let's say, the milah knife is muksa, whatever you're going to tell me about muksa is not, it's associated to muksa. It's not a part of muksa. It's not a part in the kalal of muksa. So it's not, it was not there in the original statement. You're making a more questionable, if that's the right word, a less vadai, a less sustainable, maybe, extension. It wasn't in your first statement. It wasn't in, let's get to the end of the paragraph, but that's going to be what it is. We'll just get all the information. Again, v'chein ilu an shamata mama shayizmel shalmilo hu mukse hine kol mashi vadal lano heyod mischaber lanoso zeh shel mukse tadin bli safek himatza bizmel shamilo va'al kein teda. Here comes the specification. Shet teda shamuksa also betiltul. We now, if we know, and you tell me a piece of information about muksa that it's also betiltul, teda sha'izmil shamila also betiltul. I told you the mila knife is muksa. B1, that piece of information, muksa, has a piece of information connected to it, which is that muksa is asa b'tiltul. So now I know a mila knife is asa b'tiltul. But asa b'tiltul is not, it's a mischaber, it's an associated concept. It's that type of piece of information of connected to muksa. Different than telling me Ruvain is a part. He's a prat in the klal of Kol Yisrael. The relationship here is not as solid. It was not in the original statement. It can be. But you see here, right, because you see here he said mischaber. Remember, when he gave us our original shoresh, it was, you had the possibility of prat and klal also in the information. But that's not the example of muksa. I'm not sure that works. Not sure that works. You have to think about that. I was actually thinking about that today. You get to an example. You'll say, Kol Yisrael, Yesh Lam Chelek L'Olam Haba. You know what's associated with Kol Yisrael? Pastrami. Yeah, so now people who keep Shabbos, no, people who keep Shabbos, they're not associated with all Jews. They are all Jews, or all Jews, or they're a prat in the cloud. They're actually a subgroup in Jews. But what's associated with all Jews? Bagels and lox? So bagel and lox get what? People in New York? I don't know. What's associated with all Jews? What would be A1? Not in a prat and a cloud. An associated term. Bagels and lox. Therefore, all bagels and lox have a chelik l'olam haba.
Maybe an Uber. Unborn child. Unborn Jewish child. You get that on the bus?
That is a great possibility, because you'll tell me they're not really part of all Jews. Right? Because they're not born yet. Great. No, folks, what do you want to say about that? I mean, I can tell you what I would say, but what do you want to say about that? Would an unborn Jewish fetus, well, don't call it Jewish. Oh! That's a conversation, that's a Friday conversation. There's a lot to talk about that. Maybe after 40 days, maybe the neshama already comes down. So maybe it's on the neshama is Jewish, so he really is part of Jerusalem. Like, there's a lot to be said about that. Good question. Okay, what time is it? I got 5 minutes. Let's do just some more here, because the back part of the page has some very important things for us. Okay, turn the page. Hinei hamam harishon shemimenu yimshach hasheni nikra hakdama. The first sentence, the primary sentence, what we will call the premise, is called the hakdama, preface or whatever. V'nimshach, the conclusion or the consequence, is called the tolada, that which was a totsa'ah. How would you translate the word totsa'ah in English? Result. Okay, result. This process of giving birth to the result, the consequence, the conclusion from the premise, that structure is called a hekesh. When it's this form, that what we've been talking about now, it's called a hekesh mofti, classical syllogism. The English word for hekesh is syllogism. Big thing to point out to you, you will notice here that the Ramchal only talked about two parts. And as I explained to you before in creativity, and I'm still right, that it means taking two pieces, like he himself told us. You know that a mila knife is muksa. You know, muksa means asa b'tiltul. So now I'm a chadesh, right? So that's 1 and 2. I produce number 3, the tolada, the conclusion, the consequence, that a mila knife is asa b'tiltul. So why did the Ramchal, and he's talking about hekishim, that's a hekish. Why did the Ramchal only talk about 2 parts? Why did he only talk about 2 parts? He missed the part. And it's essential to the structure. I mean, you can't have a structure known as a syllogism called a hekesh, this creative thing. You can't have it unless you have 3 parts. You have to have premise number 1, premise number 2, and you have the conclusion. But the Ramchal just talked about 2, the Hakdam and the Nimshach. What? Yes, that may be true, but you can't have less than 2. I mean, you can't have less than 2 premises. So, yeah, but you only talk about 1. No, because 2 is the minimum. You have to have 2. We understand that a hekesh, though I liked it. don't think I didn't like. I liked it. That was good. A hekesh by definition is 2 premises. You have to have 2 premises to produce your conclusion. So why did the Ramchal only talk about 1 premise? He said Zenikra, the Rishon. You see, he says himself is Rishon. So we will use our built-in mukhachti. It must be there's a sheni. Okay, but that being said, the reason is like this. The hekeshim that we see in the Gemara are not complete hekeshim. We as people don't talk like that. Oh, all Jews have a chelik in olam haba. Reuven's a Jew. Hey, therefore Reuven has a chelik in olam haba. We don't talk that way. We think that way, we don't talk that way. The Gemara thinks that way, the Gemara doesn't talk that way. The Gemara, there's actually two types of Hekeshim, a complete and an incomplete. A complete is where you give both premises, and then you get the conclusion. An incomplete is where you have one premise, and sometimes you don't even have one premise, it's just, you're supposed to understand it, but you usually have one premise and the conclusion. These are the kind the Gemara gives. You have to be aware that there's something missing. The Gemara means it, it just didn't state it. Hey, you got to do some of the work too. Not that you're rewriting, you're not allowed to rewrite the Gemara. It's obviously what it is, but you got to put it in. That's why the Ramchal here, because in Derech Tfunos, different than the book of Logic, Derech Tfunos involves the Gemara, so we talk about a premise, conclusion. Premise, conclusion. Incomplete, the only Hakeshim in the Gemara, I can't say only, but I don't know enough to say that, but the majority by far are incomplete. And you have to be aware of it, that there's something missing, you have to supply. So that's going to be one of our Targilim. I want to skip down, because we have to end. I want the second to last paragraph on this page. The other, please take it and read the part we're skipping. That's where he talks about where it's not mukhrach, which goes back to our conversation of vadai and bli safek. Let's read this. Va'amnan, b'davar hazeh tipol hataos b'sichlo shel adam. In this structure is where you get mistakes. If I had to say to you, the person says, listen, where do people make mistakes in their thinking, in their logic, in their thinking? I say, right here. I can limit it and zhup, right here. It doesn't mean a person could be he didn't understand it properly and things like that. But this in the thinking is where the mistakes are. What we skipped is where that middle premise, all Jews have a chelik in the olam haba. An Ibor is a Jew, therefore he has a chelik. No, an Ibor is not a Jew, so he doesn't have a chelik. That middle piece, when we went from the klal to the prats in that klal, that's where you have mistakes. Oh, I thought this was one of those. I told you it's not. I told you don't handle it like that. I told you got to go do it. Oh, well, I thought. I happen to have one kid who makes, when they make mistakes, they will always tell me, well, I thought that was that. And for years, well, I know you thought, but you didn't listen. But that's exactly where it is. So that's where mistakes will be. And not only that, vigam, third line, second word, yiplu hamachlokes vehefresh ben asvaros va'alkin yikareh she'echad yoli tol echad ve'echad yachishenu. It's not only this is the place for human mistakes in their thinking, this is also the place for machlokeses in the Gemara and in other things. Is, like I just that example, what is this a prat in that klal or not? He'll say yes, he'll say no. And also svaras. Not just hefreshes in the machlokas, but also in the svaras, he'll say same thing. That's why this is primary. What we did so far today, we're stopping here. Next time we're going to do the other 3 or 4 hekeshim. We're going to do binyanav, kal v'chomer, a hekesh talui, hypothetical syllogism, and an or statement, which is a disjunctive syllogism, a hekesh machalik. We'll do next time. But this is take-home things to look at. Spend time on this. And I will give you a list because 2 things I want you to do. Just to get the structure over, you have to hear it. Some people hear it naturally better, some people a little less better, though we all hear it. This is not anything new that you don't do. You do this 100 times every day. Your kids do it, you do it, your wife, everybody's doing it all the time. But you have to become conscious that you're doing it and be able to feel the terms in it. That's number 1. And then we have to practice doing it when it's an incomplete syllogism. On this side, where you don't have both premises, and we have to practice filling in the unstated premise. So you'll see some of that here. On this sheet you have a Hekesh Mofti and a Hekesh Bilti Shalem. Look at them. If you want to bring examples, that's great. If not, again, Friday for people who want to come, and this is what we'll work on. Anything else we did today? But we really want to get the Hekeshim. We must, and it's happening on every daf, and it's so, this is the essential work. It's happening. We for proofs, rayas, steers, kashas, terutzim. Thank you. Okay, that's it.